What I can tell you is that text in no way suggested that I or the FBI would take any action to influence the candidacy of
Agent Strzok, that is a fantastic answer to a question nobody asked.
Yeah, Mr.
You wrote, God, Hillary should win 100 million to 0. And I'm assuming Hillary would be former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton?
That's correct.
All right. In March of 2016, weren't you investigating her for potential mishandling of classified information?
We were.
Had you interviewed her yet?
No.
Had you interviewed more than 30 other witnesses that wound up being interviewed?
I would have to check the case file, but I'll take your representation.
Well, if she had said something incriminating in your interview that took place months later of her, would she have won 100 million to 0 then?
Likely not, no.
Well, then why wouldn't you wait until the investigation was over before you have her the nominee and winning a general election against an opponent that hadn't even been named yet? 100 million to 0, Agent Strzok, that's how bad she should win?
If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016. Democrats are using this investigation as a presumption of guilt, which I find astonishing. And in the long run, for the health of this republic, I would encourage them to go back to the presumption of innocence that we used to hold sacred. There's a presumption of guilt. There's a desire by Democrat senators to fundraise off of your investigation. More than 60 Democrats have already voted to proceed with impeachment before Bob Mueller has found a single solitary damn thing. More than 60 have voted to move forward with impeachment, and he hasn't presented his first finding. So I'm going to say this to you, Mr. Ray, Mr. Rosenstein. I realize that neither one of you were there when this happened, but you're both there now. Russia attacked this country. They should be the target, but Russia isn't being hurt by this investigation right now. We are. This country is being hurt by it. We are being divided. We've seen the bias. We've seen the bias. We need to see the evidence. If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. If you have evidence that this president acted inappropriately, present it to the American people. There's an old saying that justice delayed is justice denied. I think right now all of us are being denied. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart. And these exact same FBI agents and attorneys prejudged the outcome of the Russia investigation before it even began. If prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it ends and prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it begins is not evidence of outcome determinative bias, for the life of me, I don't know what would be. That is textbook bias. It is quite literally the definition of bias. You recall who specifically at the White House rejected Sidney Blumenthal?
No, I do not.
Documents show he was your most prolific emailer on Libya and Benghazi. And my question to you is, did the president, the same White House that said you can't handle him, can't hire him, did he know? Did her lawyers read the email content individually?
No.
Well, in the interest of time, and because I have a plane to catch tomorrow afternoon, I'm not going to go through any more of the false statements.
After very careful consideration, I've decided to follow my counsel's advice and not testify or answer any of the questions today.
She just testified. She just waived her Fifth Amendment right to privilege. You don't get to tell your side of the story and then not be subjected to cross-examination. That's not the way it works. She waived her right to Fifth Amendment privilege by issuing an opening statement. She ought to stand here and answer our questions. So you're a professor at MIT and you're worried about not looking smart enough?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you succeeded if that was your goal. Pronounce Shkreli.
Yes, sir.
See, there you can answer some questions. That one didn't incriminate you. I just want to make sure you understand you are welcome to answer questions, and not all of your answers are going to subject you to incrimination. Do you understand that, don't you? I think these questions are fair. The Tea Party's very dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Who, Miss Lerner? Who thinks they're dangerous? You? The IRS? Dangerous in what way?
I am not surprised that the President of the United States called this a phony scandal. I'm not surprised that Secretary Clinton asked, what difference does it make? I'm not even surprised that Jay Carney said Benghazi happened a long time ago. I'm just surprised at how many people bought it.
When I see quotes like I did today from someone named Dan Pfeiffer, who apparently works for the president. I think it's the same Dan Pfeiffer that once said the law is irrelevant. And he tweeted out today that our plan is to allow some kids to stay but deport their parents. He summarized this entire debate with that tweet. So I want to compliment you and thank you for not being a demagogic, self-serving political hack who can't even be elected to a parent advisory committee, much less Congress, which is what Mr. Pfeiffer is. I want to thank you for not being that and understanding these are complex issues where reasonable minds can perhaps differ.
Acts directly contradict the statements you made on national television this last Sunday.
No, sir. With all due respect, they do not. We just heard email after email after email about Libya and Benghazi that Sidney Blumenthal sent to the Secretary of State. I don't care if he sent it by Morse code, carrier pigeon, smoke signals. The fact that he happened to send it by email is irrelevant. What is relevant is that he was sending information to the Secretary of State. That is what's relevant. Now, with respect to the subpoena, if he'd bothered to answer the telephone calls of our committee, he wouldn't have needed a subpoena, because nothing undercuts the fabric of this republic, like people picking and choosing which laws they're going to enforce, when they're going to do it, when it's politically opportune for them not to do it. So I'm happy to talk preemption. I'm happy to talk stare decisis. I'm happy to talk supremacy clause. I'm happy to talk enumerated powers or any other legal concept you want to talk about. What I will not do is let state and local prosecutors and state and local law enforcement be disparaged and say, we trust you to handle homicide cases, but we're not going to trust you to handle immigration cases. That I will not do. The president was given the duty to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. So my question, Mr. Speaker, is what does that mean to you, that the laws be faithfully executed? We know the president can veto a bill for any reason or no reason. We know the president can refuse to defend the constitutionality of a statute, even one that he signs into law. We know the president can issue pardons for violations of the very laws that we pass. And we know that the president has prosecutorial discretion as evidenced and used through his U.S. attorneys. Mr. Speaker, that is a lot of power. What are we to do when that amount of power is not enough? What are we to do when this president or any president decides to selectively enforce a portion of a law and ignore other portions of that law? What do we do, Mr. Speaker, regardless of motivation, when a president nullifies our vote by failing to faithfully execute the law? How do we explain waivers and exemptions and delays in a bill passed by Congress and affirmed by the United States Supreme Court? How do we explain away a refusal to enforce mandatory minimums that were passed by Congress and affirmed by the Supreme Court? And why pursue, Mr. Speaker, immigration reform if presidents can turn off the very provisions that we passed? You know, in the oath that brand new citizens take, it contains 6 different references to the law. If it's good enough for us to ask brand new citizens to affirm their devotion to the law, is it too much to ask that the president do the same?
Just so everyone's clear, methamphetamine is scheduled what?
I believe it's scheduled
2. Cocaine is scheduled what?
also 2.
Cocaine base is scheduled what? 2. So it is scheduled lower than marijuana. And again, you can schedule something and still not have it scheduled as a 1. And I would encourage the powers that be, whoever you need to consult with in the administration, to at least explore whether or not it's scheduled correctly.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, gentleman from South Carolina.
I have an inquiry.
Yes.
Is Mr. Hanna here?
Yes.
Well, then why did Mr. Cummings ask him the questions? He'll have a chance to ask Mr. Hanna whatever questions he wants to ask him. We don't have a chance to ask Mr. Rhodes the questions we want to ask because he didn't bother to show up.
Chairman
Mr.
Yield.
Hanna did.
But Chairman Yield,
Yes.
I can say whatever I want to say in my opening statement.
Yes, you can. It just needs to be fair. That's my point. Just be fair about it.
What process is afforded a U.S. citizen, not someone who's overstayed a visa, not someone who crossed the border without permission, but an American citizen, what process is currently afforded an American citizen before they go on that list?
I'm sorry, there's not a process afforded the citizen prior to getting on the list. There is a process should someone feel they are unduly placed on the list.
Yes, there is. And when I say process, I'm actually using half of the term due process, which is a phrase we find in the Constitution, that you cannot deprive people of certain things without due process. So I understand Mr. Good's idea, which is wait until your right has been taken from you and then you can petition the government to get it back. I understand that that's his idea. My question is, can you name another constitutional right that we have that is chilled until you find out it's chilled and then you have to petition the government to get it back? Is that true with the First Amendment?
Sir, there are strict criteria before.
That's not my question, ma'am. That is not my question. My question is, what process is afforded a United States citizen before that person's constitutional right is infringed? Then he's fine with doing it with the Second Amendment. My question is, how about the First? How about we not let them set up a website or a Google account? How about we not let them join the church until they can petition government to get off the list? How about not get a lawyer? How about the Sixth Amendment? How about you can't get a lawyer until you petition the government to get off the list? Or my favorite, how about the Eighth Amendment? We're going to subject you to cruel and unusual punishment until you petition the government to get off the list. Is there another constitutional right that we treat the same way for American citizens that we do the Second Amendment? Can you think of one? At the conclusion of that sentence, he was released from the Bureau of Prisons to a known sanctuary jurisdiction for the ostensible prosecution of an old drug case. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, San Francisco did not prosecute that old drug case. They dismissed it, which surprises exactly no one. And then they released this defendant. They did not return him to the Bureau of Prisons. They did not return him to federal probation. They did not honor the detainer that had been placed by ICE. They released him, who was not supposed to be in the country in the first place, with this horrific criminal history. They released him so he would be free to walk around and shoot someone's daughter, which is exactly what he did. And Mr. Speaker, we are given a litany of excuses. I've heard them this morning, Mr. Speaker, for policies like this. We're told that we need policies like the one in San Francisco so people will cooperate with law enforcement. I want you, Mr. Speaker, to consider just how utterly illogical that comment is. We need to release known criminals back into society so society will help us catch known criminals. How absurd is that? Functional control over the border, but I've yet to hear how somebody can re-enter 5 times if you have functional control over the border. I've heard we need citizenship for 11 million undocumented aspiring Americans, as if 11 million of any category can pass a background check. I've heard arguments against empowering state and local law enforcement to assist in the enforcement of our immigration laws, Mr. Chairman. Now stop and think. We trust them to do murder cases, sex assault cases, kidnapping cases, narcotics trafficking. You even trust them to provide security, Mr. Speaker, at their own functions back in the district. But when it comes to immigration law, oh no, No, sir, we don't trust you to enforce immigration law. Everything else, including our own security, both here in Washington and back in the district. But God forbid we trust state and local cops to help us with immigration law. A sanctuary for Kate Steinle? Or a refuge for a convicted felon with a 25-year-long criminal history? So the phrase sounds benign, but it was no sanctuary for her. It may have been for him, but it sure as hell wasn't for her.